Is disability insurance the forgotten but essential piece of your client's health insurance strategy? We'll find out on this episode of ShiftShapers.
Change either energizes or paralyzes. The choice is yours. This is the ShiftShapers Podcast, bringing the employee benefits industry interviews with individuals and companies who are shaping the industry's shifts. And now, here's your host, David Saltzman.
And to help us answer that question, we've invited my old friend Don Schamay, who is Regional Director of Executive Benefits at the Principal. So now that we've talked a little bit about some of the fundamental aspects of disability income group and individual, et cetera, and where the market stands, let's talk a little bit about, what three areas, where's the need? And I think you and I talked off air, there are three different areas that I'd like to explore. The first is young professionals, and then we can talk about business solutions and then executive benefit solutions. So let's talk a little bit about young professionals. What's that need look like?
Right. So we do a lot of work in the individual side for what we describe as young professionals. These are folks that are either in their medical residency, their dental residency, their veterinary medicine residency, folks that are doing some of the support around that, like the CRNAs. Those are folks that frankly don't get a lot of group disability insurance from their perspective, maybe hospital or medical practice or dental practice. A lot of dental practices don't give any group disability insurance. I always think is weird because it's available and it's really not that expensive, but they really just don't offer a lot to the staff. But also those professions, as they get more and more embedded, more and more embedded in the skill, obviously those incomes really start to go up. So they always outrun the group insurance as well. So there are a lot of advisors that will work with them when they're young in their careers by, say, a very modest disability policy on them. But then they maintain the relationship over time with those young professionals. And as their incomes grow and their families grow and their expenses grow, they're just adding to those policies. It's a great way for somebody, in the individual financial professional realm to get some high net worth clients very early in their careers and establish relationships with them. By the way, you don't see it quite as much, but I would say the same thing about young entrepreneurs, right? They're young professionals, but there's really not a lot of people, going after that young entrepreneur set early in their careers. But, I insure people's incomes. I look at people's incomes all day long, and I'm going to tell you that there are some small business owners, a lot of small business owners, frankly, that are in weird occupations you would never think about, and they make way more than any doctor or any surgeon or any. It's kind of, don't sleep on that. My point is.
Well, and it also covers the sticky. I mean, it does create a longer lasting employer advisor connection.
It sure does. And you can watch companies grow, over time, and you never know. When I was at Paul Revere, and it was not in my office, but it was in the DC office, there was a advisor who started working with a small company called AOL when it was only 10 employees, right? And you can imagine what happened with that, right? It's not technically around much in its same form today, but just think about if you can get with a young professional person who is working, in a space that's going to have the ability to really explode over time. What a great client to have. And a lot of times, they need individual disability insurance protection. They need group insurance for those small businesses for sure. It's a great way to get your foot in the door. And maybe from a competitive standpoint, right? Because everybody's selling health insurance. Maybe you can offer something that's a little bit different that gets your foot in the door and can, like you say, start a very long-term relationship. The persistency on these individual policies is excellent. I've had a chance to look at some folks' blocks of business, some of my GAs over time. They built great businesses over time with these with the disability products because they just are sticky, as you said.
And we'll talk a little bit about kind of comp when we get further into our conversation. But the area where I spent a lot of my time was in business solutions. Talk a little bit about that and what else how that's another thing that an advisor can bring to the table and create a longer term relationship with a client.
Right. Great. Because, think about the business owner. The business owner really has two assets, right? They have the ability to work. That's probably their most important asset, right? So that's one asset we need to insure. But the reality is, as a business owner, they have this other asset, the business itself. What happens if they can't sick, or if they get sick or hurt, can't work for an extended period of time? That business wants to survive their absence as well, right? So the individual market has also allowed for buy-sell planning, right? We've got owners that have partners or additional shareholders. They all have obligations to one another. They usually have a buy-sell agreement, almost always, and buy-sell agreements are legal documents. Everybody signed them. They obligate you to something. You might want to know what it obligates you to. It often obligates you to buy your partners out if you get sick or hurt. We have overhead expense insurance, which replaces the expenses that are needed to maintain or, continue that business's day-to-day operation, things like rent, the utilities, employees' salaries. There's overhead expense insurance that pays those. We have loan protection insurance in the marketplace now, where, you have the ability to pay off a business loan if somebody gets sick or hurt. There's nothing in those loan documents that say if you get sick or hurt, you can't work, the bank's not coming for their money. They are, right? So we have that. And then we have key person disability insurance as well. Same, right? You've got key people within that business. They're valuable. They're no longer able to contribute to the success of the business. That the business needs to be compensated for their absence to survive their absence. So good solutions that are out there. I still will tell advisors, look at the individual first, look at the group insurance, look at the individual first, but don't neglect those business solutions because they're very much a needed conversation from those, for that business.
Well, we oftentimes advisors will ask, how do I start that conversation? How do I get into that? I cannot tell you, although you and I have talked about it, how many clients I picked up and how much money I made when I was selling by asking, when was the last time your buy-sell agreement was reviewed?
Right.
Because I knew going in what the business owners had not really paid any attention to. And that is, you said correctly so, it creates an obligation. But it creates an obligation. Almost all of the agreements are stock agreements. They create an obligation in the event of death, but also in the event of disability. And since largely they're sold by life insurance folks, they don't often fund them for disability, or they frequently leave that open. And when you can show a client that exposure, you're their new best friend. You're their agent for life. So there's a lot of opportunity there, and it doesn't take a heavy lift to do it.
Well, we talked earlier about the chance of disability, but you're 3 to 4 times more likely to be disabled, than you are die before you're 65 years old. Just the reality. So, those obligations underneath those buy-sell agreements, it's real. It happens. I was in a lawyer's office a few years ago out in Athens, and we were talking about this, and it was actually, we were talking about it for his firm. When he, in the course of the conversation, he goes, I know what you're talking about. He goes, we just had this with one of our clients, and, we got that guy some money. He said it that way to me. He said it to me. I said, oh, you got that guy some money because he didn't have a buy-sell agreement that was funded, and you guys had to go into negotiation. When you say it that way, I figure not all the parties were happy with the money that you got the guy.
Right. And yet you could have funded it for pennies on the dollar, the same as you did with the life insurance.
It's the same thing that you did, where there's really no difference.
The third area is an area that's, somewhat newer, at least in terms of the parlance, and that's executive benefit solutions. What are they, and how do those differ from the business solutions?
Yeah, so think of the executive benefits as really it's an extension of the group disabilities. We talked about earlier that the group disability insurance for maybe 5 or 10% of an employee population just can't cover the incomes adequately. So what we have now in the marketplace, generally starting at 5 or more lives, almost all the carriers now will offer you some type of guaranteed issue protection if the employer pays for those individual disability policies on a group of individuals, right? So again, starts at usually 5 or more lives. It typically employer paid, although there's some opportunity to do this even on a voluntary basis on a guaranteed issue platform. But that's the key is we're just enhancing the group for the most highly compensated individuals where, again, earlier I talked about where maybe the bonuses aren't covered, maybe the K1 distributions have not been covered. We're coming in and layering in these individual policies. Kind of think of it as sold as a group, but they're really still individual policies, but you're gaining the guaranteed issue. And typically most carriers are discounting the product either somewhere between 15 and 30%, depending on the size of the group and how the carrier goes about their discount structure. So you're getting savings, you're getting guaranteed issue benefits, again, starting at about 5 or more lives.
And those discounts are significant because it's not an inexpensive product to purchase.
It's not. And, where I talked about the group being about 0.4% on average, the individual tends to be about 1.5%, somewhere in there. But again, a little bit different. The individual product, portable, the individual product premiums guaranteed at least age 65 and age 67. We can't come back and re-rate anything if we made a mistake. So there's a reason that premium's a little bit higher. And sometimes the individual product is even a little bit more liberal in its language. So yes, a little bit more expensive, but there's value in that difference in premium.
And now, a word from our sponsor. You're not just an advisor, you're a game changer. Forget cookie cutter off-the-shelf solutions. That's yesterday's news. It's 2025, and it's all about delivering bold, custom-crafted plans that truly make a difference. At the core is a razor-sharp self-insured framework, but the real magic? That's in the high-impact point solutions you strategically layer in to slash costs and supercharge member outcomes. But let's be real. That's where the headaches start. Hours wasted sifting through endless options, wrestling with integration issues, and fighting data sharing roadblocks. It's a time suck, and it's holding you back. Not anymore. Meet Benepower, the AI-powered game changer that builds killer plans in minutes, not hours. Benepower doesn't just curate the best point solutions, it makes them work together seamlessly, streamlining communication and driving collaboration like never before. With Benepower, you're armed with an end-to-end AI-enabled solution that makes you unstoppable. Spend less time piecing together a patchwork plan and more time selling. Your clients get unmatched ROI, and you become the go-to advisor that everyone's talking about. Want to take your game to the next level? Visit benepower.ai or schedule a demo at info@benepower.com. Find your power with Benepower. And now, back to our conversation. For a long time, for some producers, the big boogeyman of disability income, especially on the individual side, was underwriting. And you'd hear people wail and moan about how difficult it was to get a case through underwriting and how it took forever and how they were forever chasing little bits of information. Has that changed? Has it gotten better? What can an advisor look for with a properly completed application?
Thanks for asking that because it's gotten a lot better. When the industry sort of crashed and burned back in the 90s and like we were still struggling in the early 2000s, there were some health issues, especially the mental nervous or anxiety and depression related claims that were weighing on the industry. I will tell you that over time that has sort of been put in the rearview mirror a little bit. And people, I think this is my own feeling about it, is I think people are dealing with mental health much better than they ever have been. And therefore we don't have quite as many claims from that. It's hard to put your finger on that, but, that was something that, if you had, been on any kind of antidepressant medicine for a while there, you were getting a decline. Today, no carrier really declines you unless you're on a heavy antidepressant medicine. And there's all kinds of other medical, issues that have improved as well. High blood pressure, cholesterol, things that created waivers and modifications on policies and ratings. We don't do that anymore. We basically, big pharma, say what you will at times about big pharma, but big pharma has helped a lot of people as well. We've seen it in some of the that risk history. So we're not quite as concerned about some of those issues that we may have been in the past. Obviously, it makes it a little bit easier for us to issue these policies at our best rates with very modest, if any, modifications.
Let's talk about what is decidedly an upside of these products, and that is the revenue stream for the advisor. It can be an extremely lucrative product line to add to what you're offering your clients, can't it?
And whether it's group disability or individual disability, I think most of your folks know that group disability, you're probably somewhere between 10 and 15% revenue on the group, depending on kind of, bonus structures and those kinds of things with different carriers. With individual, you're anywhere from 50 to 75% on medically underwritten business. And then when you get into that guaranteed issue, you're sometimes in that 40 to maybe as much as 70% first year comp and maybe 5 to 10% renewals. And we talked about earlier that the business is sticky, right? These products, once the people have them, they tend not to get rid of them. I've had my disability policy for almost 40 years, actually 2 of them for almost 40 years. Once they're in there, because those premiums aren't changing, people keep them. So it's a great way to build recurring revenue, right? Because of that renewal infrastructure that both the group and the individual have. But on the individual side, a little bit more heavy commission on the front end. Just, rewarding people for taking the time out really to convince people to buy it. I think that's the biggest issue that, people, advisors have is, hey, I've got to maybe, I'm super busy with my group solutions and my employee benefit platforms that I'm putting in place. I've got to stop and now have maybe a little bit more of an intentional conversation, but the industry is going to reward you for that monetarily.
There's enough reward so that if you have a small office, you could have somebody who specializes in DI and you open the case and then you turn them over to somebody or you bring them with you and you do it together.
I think that's a great point. I work with a lot of firms that have one individual, like you say, has just become an expert in that area, and we're going to share the revenue between the advisors on that. I'll tell you the other thing that's happened is, hear the term maybe broker's broker, but you have folks that are now working with employee benefit firms. They're not employed by the firm, but they have a relationship with the firm so that when the employee benefit advisor has identified a need for a business owner or a set of executives that need this conversation, they partner with that another broker who maybe, again, specializes in this individual market, and they just split the business with that. So again, really, there's good opportunities for somebody to have the conversation, whether you want to build your own expertise or whether you want to, I use your term, lay off the risk a little bit to another advisor and ask them to help you out.
There's a lot to learn and there's a lot involved in these contracts. If you're a baby advisor, or if you're just thinking, hey, I'm a seasoned advisor, I'm looking for new conversations to want to have with my clients, et cetera, how do you learn about this stuff? I mean, I remember how we used to do it in the old days, and we had the tablets that Moses brought down the mountain with the chiseling and what. Today, how do you do that?
Well, there's a variety of ways. There's a couple of resources that, I throw out there just as good resources. The Council for Disability Insurance Advisors is a independent third-party resource that has a lot of good marketing material associated. I think that's one of the best, resources out there on an independent platform. I know NAIFA does Life Happens now. There's some stuff on Life Happens that you can work through. I think that's a good resource as well. NABIP has, in our, quarterly meetings and things that, your local NABIP chapters have, I would go and just pay attention to those times when you have disability insurance as a topic. The other thing you can do is just align yourself with a good BGA, a good broker general agency who specializes in this. And there's several of these across the country, the Plus Group, and then a lot of the big BGAs now, national BGAs, have their own folks that are specializing in disability insurance. So just ask, hey, how do I what resources do you have that I can kind of lean on? And then obviously there's always, guys like me, the carrier reps that are always there that want to, partner with you as well. So, any of those resources are great places to start. The one individual side data, the one thing that I'll also say is, read a specimen contract. And it's an old school thing, but ask your wholesaler to provide you with a specimen contract. It takes about, I would say, maybe 25 minutes to read through a contract. You'll be amazed just by reading through the contract how much more confident you'll be at what this product is, what this solution is going to do for your client. How does it really work? And I say the same thing on the group side as well. Take a group contract, same exact thing. A little bit old school, just kind of reading through that sometimes, I think just gives advisors a lot of confidence as well.
I think that's certainly a great place to start. And it's a great place to end our conversation for today. Don Schamay, Regional Director of Executive Benefits at Principal Financial Group. Don, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with our audience.
Thanks, Dave. It's been my pleasure.
I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor and our producer, Hatcher Media. Hey, if you need podcast production or professional graphic design, Josh Hatcher's the expert to contact. For more information, visit him at hatchermedia.net. That's HATCHER media.net.
This ShiftShapers podcast is copyrighted content and may not be reproduced in whole or in part without the express written permission of ShiftShapers Solutions, LLC. Copyright 2024.